Good evening. Thank you for joining the evening review this evening. Let's have a look at these headlines for today. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We have in studio this evening, Ms. Ingrid Husselmann, the Children's Advocate in the Office of the Ombudsman. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Ingrid.
Thank you so much for having me, Jemima.
Now, Ms. Ingrid, very little is known about the Children's Advocate, the role that you play. Can you talk to us about that role, please? The myths, the misperceptions, and obviously the actual role.
Yes, I'll be glad to, Jemima. So the Children's Advocate is housed in the Office of the Ombudsman. And the reason for that is because children's rights are human rights, and the Ombudsman is then the National Human Rights Institution in Namibia. So that's why the Children's Advocate is there. And basically the idea is to have like a high-placed individual who is there specifically to advocate for children's rights. And the position is created in the not so new anymore Child Care and Protection Act, which came into operation on the 30th of January 2019. And then the role is pretty much, or the functions of the Children's Advocate is pretty much set out in Section 25 of the Act. And it provides that the Children's Advocate is there to assist the Ombudsman to discharge his duties when it comes to children. And that is pretty much to monitor the enforcement of laws, particularly the Child Care and Protection Act, as well as any other laws that are put in place for the protection of children's rights. And then also to receive and investigate complaints concerning violations of children's rights or threats of violations of children's rights. And then also to do awareness raising and public education about children's rights. So basically, anyone can complain about anything concerning children to us. There's really no right or wrong answer, because what we'll do is, if we cannot assist you, or if there's another body or organization that is better equipped to provide you with the necessary advice, information, or assistance, we will refer you to that organization. But other than that, we will take your complaint and we will investigate it, and we will try and resolve whatever issues there are, whether these issues are related to maladministration or just child rights violations issues. We will try and intervene on the child's behalf in order to find an amicable type of solution that doesn't involve necessarily volatile type of, or litigation, let me rather put it that way. And then also the Children's Advocate also has the powers to intervene into proceedings before the Children's Court as a party, and we also represent children if the need be. So
Now
that's
before,
pretty much in a
yeah,
nutshell what we
thank you for
do.
that. Now before we get to your role to intervene in the children's court, we've had an issue regarding that. Can we first talk about the criticism that your office is subjected to? Many people believe that your office is very slow in implementing the Child Care Protection Act. What are the challenges that you are faced with?
Okay, so perhaps that's one of the misperceptions. So the implementation of the Child Care and Protection Act is not the function or the duty of the Children's Advocate or of the Ombudsman. Um, that duty is actually that of the Ministry of Gender Equality, Poverty Eradication and Social Welfare. So that is the ministry that is responsible for the implementation of the Act. So our role is to monitor them. So this is why we receive and investigate quite a number of complaints against social workers or against other institutions that are supposed to provide services to children and then they don't in terms of the Child Care and Protection Act. So, for instance, well, I'm not aware of specific criticisms, but I can tell you what we've been doing. For instance, late last year, we started proceedings when we learned about a young boy who was incarcerated in Rehoboth, was 13 years old, and he was a child in conflict with the law, and we learned that he was being detained in the police holding cells. So we then engaged the Minister of Gender, and we asked her why this is the case, because the Child Care and Protection Act provides that children who are in conflict with the law are supposed to be detained in childcare facilities, and there's like a wide array of options available to the Minister of Gender, and police holding cells should be really the last resort. And then we ended up having to go to court to compel the minister, to get an order to compel the minister to put this particular provisions of the Child Care and Protection Act into operation, which is what we did. So to clear up the misconception, we're not responsible for implementation of the Act, but we are responsible for monitoring the implementation, and we certainly do that.
Yes, like you say, you're not responsible for the implementation of the Act, and there is much criticism, as you say now, going to the ministry. How does that? I can only imagine that it must make your work difficult as a as a child advocate, if people feel that in terms of the law they don't get what they deserve. How do you deal with these challenges?
Certainly, the children's advocate, like the Ombudsman, we try and consult parties, and we try and rather persuade through non-litigious manners to cooperate and to try and find amicable solutions for problems involving children. But yes, it is very frustrating to know that we have an excellent legal framework. We have very, very progressive laws on children's rights, and the Child Care and Protection Act is a very comprehensive, very great piece of legislation. But if it is not implemented or not implemented properly or sufficiently, then it does not serve the welfare of children in Namibia. So we try and there are so many issues. Sometimes it feels really overwhelming that the number of issues, very serious, that affects children in Namibia. So we try and deal with things on a piecemeal type of manner, so that we can feel that we do make an impact and a marked difference. It also helps if we get complaints, because once we have a number of complaints dealing with a specific issue, we then consider it a systemic issue, and then the more voices we have, the easier it is for us to tackle the issue on whatever level. And then people are also more, the responsible institutions are also more likely to take us seriously, and we don't need to go to court ultimately, which is what we try and prevent.
Now, there's this young boy in the north of the country, Irivari. He's famously known as Irivari. He's from the San community. He was in school at a very late age. He's now, as you have pointed out earlier, a child in conflict of the law. What do you, as the children's advocate, what do you make of his situation?
Well, whenever children are in conflict with the law, they should be treated as victims first, because they are children who have been exposed either to violence or abuse or neglect of some sort, and this is why they are exposed to circumstances where they do make conflict with the law. But with regard to this child, people must remember that not only is he a victim because he's a child, he is also presumed innocent until proven guilty. And in addition to that, he is a child, and for that reason, he is exceptionally vulnerable, and he's in need of protective services. In fact, the Child Care and Protection Act makes provision for it makes a list of certain children who are in need of protective services, and a child who's in conflict with the law is one such instance. And what needs to happen is that a social worker from the Ministry of Gender must become involved in that child's case as soon as possible, and they must then investigate his circumstances, compile a report, and approach the children's court in order for the children's court to make an order regarding the placement of this child. Like, basically, are the circumstances where he finds himself currently, is it conducive for his well-being? And if not, he must be placed in a suitable alternative care.
Now, there's been mixed reaction to the fact that he must return to school. Like you've just said, he is... one must look at where he is going, whether that is conducive for his well-being. Other people believe that him being a child in conflict with the law, being at the school where other children are, he may not be conducive. His presence may not be conducive for other children's well-being. What do you make of that?
Well, it is understandable, that type of concern. I can understand. I have sympathy for that. But sometimes it's also a question of just awareness. Like I said, he is a child. He's got the right to education like every other child. And also there's the presumption of innocence, which means that he's presumed innocent until he's proven guilty. So at this point in time, his rights must be protected. But also the children, obviously, if he's a threat, and that's not something that you can just decide based on him being accused of a crime. But if he is a threat to the well-being of other children, yes, then those children is in equal need of protection. One of the first questions that comes to my mind is, I understand that he was charged with rape. So I'm not sure as to the facts exactly, but if the victim is another child, and that child is perhaps also going to that school, then certainly, depending on what the bail conditions are or the circumstances surrounding the allegations are, it might not entirely be appropriate for him to return to that specific school. But then it remains the obligation of the Ministry of Education and also the social workers' task to look after his well-being, because he's now a child in need of protective services, to find a suitable school for him. And then one must not also forget that children, when they are in school, they are the responsibility of the teachers and the staff of that particular school, and they, being the adults, are then responsible to make sure that the children's safety is ensured while they are on the school premises. So in this way, there are means to make sure that all the children's rights are protected, the ones who are accused of crimes, as well as the other children who go to that same school.
Now, Ingrid, he is from the San community, which is the most marginalized community in this country. As the advocate for children in this country, what is your, can you give us a summary of the plight of these children from that particular community?
Based on the information that we have, just based off of complaints that we have received over the years, is that one of the issues that specifically affects children, those children, is them not having access to mother tongue education. And what we've been informed by the Ministry of Education is because there aren't any teachers, or there aren't enough teachers to be able to give them mother tongue education. And there's also, and it's not only the San children, I know there's also other marginalized communities, like for example the Watwe tribe in Coqueland, who are a nomadic tribe, and the Ministry of Education has tried to set up mobile schools to attend to the educational needs of these children while their families are moving from one area to the next. How effective or not it is, I cannot tell at this point in time. But once again, there's the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Gender are tasked as other ministries who provide services to children. They are all responsible to tend to the well-being and the protection of the rights of these children, like any other child in Namibia. And yes, they have special needs, and which means that special attention must be given to them. And we will most certainly investigate where they neglect those duties if we receive complaints to that effect, or where the plight of these children are specifically brought to our attention either by the media or we pick up there's a specific problem in a specific area, we do try to address it.
Mm-hmm. Now there's the issue of sexual violence against learners, children. What is your office doing to make sure that children are safe?
Well, we do look into, or we have in the past looked into what policies and frameworks the Ministry of Education have in place, and we know that they have an excellent policy document, a school safety framework, and the ministry is responsible to ensure that children are safe at schools, and this policy document assists with that because it tells schools and teachers exactly what they need to do to ensure the safety of these children. And I mean, it is very difficult for us to specifically monitor it. So we're very much dependent upon children, parents, members of the community, to where they see there are breaches or there are certain things that are not being complied with, to report it to our office, and we will then investigate and make recommendations, which if those recommendations are not followed, then we will approach a court to enforce our recommendations. So that's basically our role. So we implore people, if they know about specific instances or endemic problems in a specific community or area, to report it to our office. But other than specifically just inquiring into systems and policies that are in place, there's not much we can do unless we receive a specific complaint regarding the safety or well-being of children.
Now, as a human rights active advocate and a children's advocate, are you convinced that government is doing a good job when it comes to the protection of children in this country?
Well, generally speaking, I would say and just based on all of the complaints that we receive, and as far as the implementation of the Child Care and Protection Act is concerned, I would say not a good enough job. Certainly, we can always do more to protect children, because it is so important. You can say so much about a society, about just from the way that it treats children and how much is invested in children. And I can say that just based on what is reported in the media on a daily basis, and the fact that so many children are still going to school under tents or huts, under circumstances where there aren't even ablution facilities. Even if it's only one school, it's too many. It's too many children being deprived of the right to basic education, for instance, to name just one example. So to answer your question, no, not enough is being done.
Now, before we conclude, is there a particular area that you feel the government is lagging behind when it comes to the protection of children? And what do you, as an advocate, suggest government must do to address this issue?
Well, there are so many pressing issues. It's really difficult to pinpoint one, but I think everything starts with education, and because it's difficult to oppress a people who's educated. So, number one priority or focus area should definitely be on the education of children, because it's only through education that they learn about, that they really learn about human dignity and about their rights and how to speak up for themselves and how to enforce those rights and to become responsible citizens, and citizens who will hold government one day responsible and accountable for their actions.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mrs. Husselmann. Have a good day, please.
Thank you so much, Jemima. It's good being here.
Thank you. Now, thank you for tuning in. God bless.